All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We are going to be unpacking the incredibly nuanced and, honestly, kind of surprising relationship between physical activity and our mental well being. We've all heard that universal prescription, right? That exercise is just automatically good for our minds. But the reality of how our bodies actually respond to physical stress is a whole lot more complex than a simple more is always better equation. Which leads us to a pretty wild question. Can you actually overdose on exercise? I know, it sounds totally counterintuitive, doesn't it? We are so culturally conditioned to believe that hitting the pavement harder, lifting heavier weights, and training longer is the ultimate key to mental clarity and stress relief. But today, we're going to absolutely shatter that universally accepted myth, and we'll see how finding your specific individual dose is the real secret to mental health. Okay, let's kick things off with Section 1, the exercise mood connection. Because before we get into the dangers of overdoing it, we really need to establish exactly why moving your body is such a powerful mood booster in the first place. So, researchers have identified three core psychological theories for why exercise gives us mental relief. First up is distraction. Basically, exercise quite literally diverts your attention away from those annoying daily stressors and anxieties. Second, it builds self-efficacy. You know the feeling, setting a physical challenge and actually crushing it naturally boosts your confidence. And third, there's that powerful element of increased social interaction and mutual support that you find in sports teams, run clubs, or just hanging out at the gym. But we've got to contrast those psychological theories with the actual physiological changes happening deep inside your brain. Exercise physically alters your neurochemistry. It cranks up the synaptic transmission of monoamines, which are neurotransmitters that actually function a lot like antidepressant drugs. And on top of that, physical exertion triggers the release of endorphins. Those are our body's endogenous opioids. Yep, those are the exact chemicals responsible for that famous, super calming runner's high. But here is where we hit an unexpected plot twist. Let's move into Section 2, the dark side of fitness. We're going to look closely at the genuine, literal danger of pushing your body past its physical limits, where the so-called medicine of movement can actually become a poison to your mind. This brings us straight to overtraining syndrome, or OTS. By definition, OTS is a condition of lowered physical performance paired with severe psychologic, neurologic, endocrinologic, and immunologic maladaptation. And it is all entirely due to inadequate recovery. I want to be super clear here. We are not just talking about feeling a little bit sore or tired after a really tough workout. No way. This is a profound long-term fatigue condition where your physiological systems essentially crash. We're talking weeks, months, or even years of rest just to bounce back. To give you a sense of just how severe this gets, a prominent sports medicine researcher actually called overtraining syndrome a depression with a new face. It's wild. When you push your body too hard for too long, the symptoms you get perfectly mimic clinical depression. Athletes dealing with OTS experience profound apathy, severe sleep disturbances, crazy emotional swings, a total loss of appetite, and extreme irritability. It's the whole shebang. Let's ground this in some hard data from a recent 2024 cross-sectional study out of Saveda Medical College. The researchers surveyed 144 college athletes specifically about their physical and mental exhaustion. The data captures a really diverse range of sports. Track and field made up the largest group, sure, but the athletes were also playing cricket, football, volleyball, and badminton. So this completely proves that the risk of overtraining isn't just isolated to one extreme type of athletic pursuit. It happens everywhere. And the most alarming takeaway from that study, 64.58%. Nearly 65% of these young, otherwise healthy college athletes reported experiencing severe mental exhaustion during their competitive season, and an even more staggering 87.5% reported physical exhaustion. To put that into perspective, we are looking at a massive, massive portion of athletes who are just operating in a severe chronic state of depletion. So what's actually driving these huge numbers? Well, the data pinpoints a very specific threshold. Training more than 5 days a week is heavily linked to severe physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion, and a much higher prevalence of both acute and chronic injuries. And the real kicker here? This holds true even during the non-competitive season. Pushing past that 5-day mark significantly spikes your risk of mental burnout, regardless of whether you've got a big game coming up or not. All right, moving right along to Section 3, finding the right dose. It's absolutely crucial to understand how your training intensity is the main factor in dictating whether exercise will heal your mind or harm it.
Let's break down the two main types of training. First, we have submaximal endurance training. That's your moderate, continuous intensity exercise. This type reliably improves your mood and builds aerobic fitness without pushing your nervous system right over the edge. On the flip side, we have high intensity interval training, or HIIT, which involves short, completely exhausting bursts above your anaerobic threshold. Now, elite athletes obviously rely on HIIT to maximize performance, but stacking up high quantities of this intense training without getting adequate rest, that is exactly what precipitates those mood crashes and triggers the overtraining syndrome we were just talking about. Now, here is where the science gets truly cutting edge. Section 4, your genes and exercise. We're actually learning now that our individual foundational biology might be the thing dictating what our perfect exercise dose really is. There's this fascinating 6-month trial on older adults living in the community. Researchers wanted to test the real mental health impact of different exercise doses. So they randomly assigned participants to one of 3 groups: high-intensity aerobic training, moderate-intensity aerobic training, or a no-contact control group. Then they carefully monitored their perceived stress, depression, and anxiety levels over that half-year period. What makes this study so incredibly cool is how they broke down the genetic data of the participants. They specifically contrasted APOE epsilon 4 carriers against non-carriers. Now, if you haven't heard of it, the APOE epsilon 4 allele is a genetic variant that elevates a person's risk for brain health decline. It's famously associated with a much higher risk for Alzheimer's disease and depression. And the outcome of this study was just absolutely stunning. For the ApoE epsilon 4 carriers, meaning the folks at the highest genetic risk for cognitive decline, high-intensity exercise actually resulted in a huge decline in perceived stress over those 6 months. But for the standard risk non-carriers, high-intensity exercise showed no significant decline in stress at all. The big takeaway here is that exercise is unequivocally not a one-size-fits-all prescription. People with genetic vulnerabilities might actually require a higher intensity to reap the mental health rewards. It acts like a built-in biological compensation mechanism. Which brings us to Section 5, hacking the vagus nerve. If you're struggling to find your own Goldilocks dose, or if you've kind of already pushed yourself into a state of overtraining and stress, we've got some actionable physiological hacks you need to recover. Honestly, it all comes down to mastering the vagus nerve. This is the longest cranial nerve in your body, and it's the main component of your parasympathetic nervous system. Basically, you can think of the vagus nerve as your body's built-in natural brake pedal. When your sympathetic nervous system puts you into a stressed-out fight-or-flight state, whether that's from too many back-to-back days at the gym or just normal life pressure, the vagus nerve is what kicks in to trigger your rest and digest response. According to the research, there are 3 highly effective, very literal steps you can take today to actively stimulate this nerve, increase your vagal tone, and build immense stress resilience. Let's walk through them really quick. First up is diaphragmatic or belly breathing. The technique is super simple but physiologically profound. You just inhale deeply through your nose for a count of 4, letting your belly expand, and then you exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 6 or 8. The literal physiological magic here is that making your exhale longer than your inhale directly triggers that parasympathetic nervous system. It instantly signals your brain and your body that it is totally safe to calm down. The second step is triggering the diving reflex through brief cold water exposure. And hey, good news, you don't need to sit in a miserable ice bath for 20 minutes to achieve this. Just a brief splash of freezing cold water on your face, or maybe finishing up your morning shower with a quick blast of cold water, will rapidly slow your heart rate and significantly improve your vagal tone. And finally, we have mindful movement practices. Incorporating activities like yoga, tai chi, or even just breath-focused, really light endurance training is incredibly powerful. These practices intentionally pair physical activity with deep rhythmic breathing. This gives your nervous system the exact neurological recovery that a stressed or overtrained body desperately needs to heal itself. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer. I want to leave you with a lingering, maybe even slightly provocative question to reflect on as you plan out your workouts this week. Are you training your body at the expense of your mind? Finding your perfect Goldilocks dose means actually listening to your biology, respecting the absolute necessity of recovery, and understanding that true fitness is always a delicate balance between physical exertion and mental resilience. Catch you next time.